Hello, my name is Dollie Boyd, and I am the museum manager here at the City of Moses Lake Museum and Art Center. And I'm hanging out with Jimi Hendrix tonight, and he and I are going to introduce a book club that we are trying to get started here at the museum. We have named this book club Not Your Mother's Book Club because, well, I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes. But the reason we wanted to start a book club to begin with was because we're sort of limited on what we can do event wise here at the museum for the time being. And so we've been trying to think of different ways to bring programming to you, to bring things that are accessible to most everyone, um, and things that we think you might be interested in. So we didn't have a book club. We thought, let's give it a try. Let's start a book club. I named it. I named it Not Your Mother's Book Club because in this club we intend to focus on authors of color and biographies of artists of color to sort of expand our cultural education. And so it might take us some places that your traditional book club might not go. So that's the idea behind the name. And the reason we kind of wanted to do that focus is because I think we all could build our cultural literacy. I think this is a moment in time where we could all stand to build empathy. Um, there's a lot of fractiousness going on in the world right now, of course. And, I've always thought of myself as a person who tried to judge people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. So that was this idea that I had of myself. But when I really drilled down on that, I found myself coming up lacking in lots of areas. Just times in my life when I could have been a better person in that regard, where I could have rejected some cultural attitudes that, I'd picked up throughout my life. I'm an older lady right now. I was born at the end of the 60s in 1968. So Jimmy was only around for a couple of years of my life. In fact, this is the 50th anniversary of Jimmy's death this year and the 52nd anniversary of my birth. So our paths only crossed, as fellow human beings for a short amount of time. But I always enjoyed his music as a younger person and now an older person. But, I never really knew much about him beyond those hits. So I picked Jimmy here as our first book club topic. I picked a biography of him to coincide with an exhibit that we have going on right now called 1968, the year that rocked Washington. And of course, Jimmy is one of our most famous native sons, a Seattle native. And the biography that I chose of him was written by a Seattle native. It was written by Charles R. Cross, who is a Seattle-based writer. I really enjoyed this book, so we're gonna jump right ahead to sort of a one-person book club today. Um, so I was going to tell you about this book that I read about Mr. Hendrix, and maybe you'll be inspired to read it too. So the book is called Roomful of Mirrors by Charles R. Cross, and there's the dust jacket cover. Um, it was a great read. I got through it pretty quickly. It clocks in at like 28, 29 chapters. There's an epilogue, and it's a little over 300 pages. It's a really smooth read. He's a wonderful writer. He writes complete chronological, narrative of Jimi Hendrix's life, starting from birth and, of course, his very famous and tragic early death at age 27. The chapters are short and manageable, which I kind of like as a reader because I don't like sometimes, it depends on what I'm reading, but in a biography, sometimes you get mired down in the minutia of someone's life and you're in the middle of a chapter like, when is this going to end? But these chapters are very manageable. You can knock one out, in a short sitting and feel like you've accomplished, a good portion of the narrative of the story. Um, he interviewed like there's like 300 interviews conducted to write this biography of Jimi Hendrix, and it shows it's very well done, and it's I think a pretty balanced portrayal of what his life was like. I learned some things about Jimmy, some good, some bad. Apparently, drinking was a real issue for him. Of course, we all know famously he took acid and lots of drugs that were associated with that rock and roll lifestyle in the 60s. But apparently, alcohol really changed his personality from what people described as a really sweet and shy and polite guy most of the time. And he became violent when he was drinking, and unfortunately he was violent with some of the women in his life, which is never a great thing to learn about someone. But you kind of see through his family history this sort of cycle that was perpetuated from his father's life, and maybe even before that, and it kind of played out the same way in his life. So not to excuse it, but definitely the author does drill down so you can understand just what was going on in his life. He's a really interesting guy. Gosh, what a bright star that burned so hot and so fast. And, I really came away from it with a good understanding of his life and better understanding of his art. And I think also there's some really interesting themes in there about sort of the cultural exchange that was going on in Seattle at the time, and the sort of really integrated high school that he went to that he always had a soft spot for in his life. And it also left me with the feeling of, gosh, what kind of music would he have created had he lived? Because he was starting to experiment with Miles Davis and get into jazz, and he was really a seeker of all forms of music. We miss you, Jimmy. 50 years. We wish we could have had you longer, but you left us some amazing art. And if you read this book, Roomful of Mirrors, you might understand him just a little bit better. So the plan now is to try and do another online meeting like this through Microsoft Teams. We're losing Zoom here at the city, so we're switching to Microsoft Teams, but they tell me that will do pretty much everything that Zoom does, so, and everybody will be able to access it, so here's hoping. But we'll have another meeting. Let me pull up my calendar here real quick. So we're going to try to have another book club meeting at the end of October, and that would be Tuesday, October 27th, 6 o'clock, same bat time. And so what I would like is to hear from you. Is there interest in a book club? What would you like to read? Would you like to read this book and we can discuss it in even deeper depth? I'm fine with that because I've already read it. I've already done the homework. But I would like to hear who you'd like to know about, what authors you'd like to read, what topics you would like to explore. And if there is some interest in this online book club to sort of break up the monotony of not having museum programs to go to. We miss you. We'll be glad to have you back when we're able to have events again. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do that. It's easy to find on our page. I'll put some links at the end of this video that you can, copy or put in your browser, and you can find out what we're up to. So, thanks for viewing. This was an introduction to Not Your Mother's Book Club.